Enlightenment doesn't ask you to gain anything. It asks you to surrender. Most people who find the path didn't go looking for the path. They were wrecked by something first: grief, disillusionment, or the specific vertigo of seeing through a story that had organized the whole of a life. These are the cracks where the path begins, not a meditation cushion. The seeking paradox is not a philosophical puzzle. It is a structural trap built into the architecture of the mind. Every tradition that has mapped the inner terrain independently arrived at the same bind. The harder you reach for direct awareness, the more the act of reaching is what obscures the view. The Zen tradition formalizes this as a riddle with no correct answer. The purpose is to exhaust the grasping mechanism, not to solve the problem. Contemporary neuroscience maps the same territory as the default mode network, the region of the brain that generates the continuous narrative of selfhood. Active from birth and silenced only by extreme states, the paradox does not resolve. The path is learning to live inside the tension without collapsing into either frantic seeking or passive waiting, which are in the end the same avoidance wearing different clothes. In the 8th century, a Tibetan master named Longchenpa spent years cataloging the mind's attempts to escape itself and left behind a body of writing so precise that contemporary contemplative researchers still use the same maps. His central claim, stated with unusual bluntness, was that the awareness you are trying to find is the same awareness you are already looking through. The teaching insists this is not a destination or a state to be achieved, but the very knowing quality present right now, before any technique is applied. The Great Perfection teaching distinguishes this naked awareness from the ordinary mind the way a mirror is distinguished from its reflections. The mirror is never improved by better images, and is never damaged by worse ones. The reason this teaching is so hard to apply is that applying is exactly the wrong relationship to the teaching. It cannot be practiced, only recognized. The way you recognize a face, and cannot explain the mechanics of recognition itself. Before the mind understands what is happening, the body has already started to reorganize. A practitioner working with a difficult emotion will often notice the shift as a physical event first. A sudden drop in the tension held across the shoulders, a change in the quality of breath, a loosening of the jaw that has been clenched without awareness for years. The philosopher Maurice Merleau-Ponty spent his career arguing that perception is never a neutral recording of reality. The body actively shapes what the mind is capable of receiving. Somatic practitioners, working in the lineage of yoga and internal martial arts, have mapped this territory in precise detail. A release in a specific pattern of muscular holding corresponds directly to a release in the story the mind has been telling about the practitioner's identity. The body is not a vehicle for the mind. The body is an argument, and when the grip releases, the understanding arrives before any explanation does. The obvious trap is the spiritual narcissist, who claims enlightenment and uses the language of non-duality to avoid accountability. Most serious practitioners know to watch for that pattern. The trap that catches people who already know about the trap is subtler and harder to see clearly. It appears as a kind of quiet superiority, not the grandiose declaration of awakening, but the private sense of watching the world from a slightly elevated position, of being the one who understands what others have not yet grasped. The Tibetan teaching tradition calls this spiritual pride, and names it the most dangerous stage on the path, precisely because the practitioner who has made real progress is the most vulnerable to the inversion. The dissolution of the old ego does not guarantee freedom from ego. It can simply generate a new one, thinner and more sophisticated, wearing the language of humility as a disguise. Every major contemplative tradition teaches that the final frontier of dissolution is not the meditation hall. It is the kitchen. The controlled conditions of retreat protect the practitioner from the specific friction that reveals what has not actually dissolved. A partner who triggers the old wound, a child who requires presence when none remains, a friend who confronts a pattern the practitioner has quietly renamed as spiritual development. Ram Dass, who spent decades teaching non-attachment, described his own parenting as the practice that finally showed him where the teaching ended and the performance began. Close relationships do not interrupt the path. Close relationships are the path, the test that retreat conditions cannot replicate, because the ego cannot hide behind silence when another person is standing directly in front of the practitioner, demanding a response. The path does not end with a breakthrough. Every tradition that has mapped this territory describes the same long country after the first opening. The slow integration of what was glimpsed, the return of old patterns, the discovery that understanding something and actually living it can be decades apart. What changes is not the presence of the struggle. What changes is the capacity to remain present inside the struggle without treating the struggle itself as evidence of failure.